Now it's time that we immediately start with our second panel. That is India and its neighbors, perspectives for economic cooperation and development. And for that, may I please invite on the stage Mr. Junaid Ahmed, Director of World Bank, and Mr. Shivraj Patil, former Lok Sabha Speaker and former Union Home Minister. And Mr. Junaid, I would like you to start with your keynote speech, how you see India in this new economic order with its challenges and potential in the region.
Dhanyavad. Namaskar. I'm at a disadvantage, and the disadvantage is there's such a rich political economy discussion, and you've asked a World Banker to come and give a presentation. My constitution and my board says I don't give political speeches, and yet you're asking me to talk about something where if I just only speak of its economics, you will not take me credibly. So I will have to ask you to let me take off my World Bank hat and speak from a very different identity. And that identity is I'm a Bangladeshi, and I'm a South Asian, and yes, I am the country director of the World Bank in India. But it's that perspective that I would like to preface in terms of my comments. Bhutan Hazarika, very famous songwriter and singer from the Northeast, from Assam, has a beautiful song, and it's a very powerful song in which he's asking the great Ganga, why are you flowing? And the song goes, Bistirno dupare, oshonkho manusher hahakar shoneo, nishobde nirobe, keno tumi boicho Ganga. The poet is asking the river that all around you see the pain of the people. And in the song it talks about the nations without leadership, talks about nations that are too individual-centric, and demands of the river an answer. Why are you still flowing so peacefully without any care? I suspect that if the river could answer back, the river would say, it is only I who connect you in a world that you divide. Right? And I think that this is an extremely important place to begin, because the historical and civilizational Indian subcontinent was arguably the most integrated region in the world until August 1947, when it overnight mutated to become the least integrated. The partition of 1947 and the emergence of the post-colonial Neo-Westphalian state not only partitioned the land and its constituent states, it also effectively partitioned the shared hydrosphere and the skies that nested them all. This partition severed all the connections that existed on land, water, and air. This physical truncation and segmentation of the commons is probably one of the biggest tragedies of the partition. And I have to say that this consequence is seen in various ways. It's seen from the fact that one of the most dynamic regions of the country, of the area, notably the Bengal Presidency, which had the highest GDP, and Shillong, its summer capital, reportedly boasted the highest per capita GDP, saw a complete decline. Now, there's a direct correlation of this partition. Perhaps other elements of this partition that can be seen is the fact that in today's India, the rivers that cross India are not managed from an India perspective, but are managed from a state perspective. Because the truncation that happened in partition carried on deep inside the ethos of the way nations were to be governed. And I think the third area which I would point to is even the Indus Water Treaty arguably followed the logic of partition, for the solution that was arrived at was essentially neatly segmenting a river basin holistically comprising 6 rivers, allocating to India and Pakistan subscribed control over 3 each. Again, the commons that kept the whole region together was completely truncated. And you saw that not only in the division of the states, but in the division of how natural resources were being managed. Now, this connectivity of the commons is something that the British colonial rulers understood completely. And they understood that any connectivity system to be efficient and effective had to conform to the geomorphology of the terrain. They knew exactly what they were doing because they built their connectivity on rivers, connected to rail, and then connected to roads. And that's how they created one of the world's most efficient extraction machineries ever existed. Post-partition, what did we do? We chose to go road, then we kind of ran rail, and we've completely ignored our waterways, right? Completely the opposite of what that integrated region actually allowed. I think the challenge that we have, the critical challenge that we face in this region today, is of addressing the segmented commons in a holistic way and managing them collaboratively. Right? This is the challenge that Bangladesh, that India, that Nepal, that Bhutan, and Pakistan face. Can they, from the Westphalian approach, go back to managing the commons, or will this truly be the tragedy of commons as we know it? I think there are certain openings that are emerging, and I want to talk about those openings. The first opening is SAARC. As a Bangladeshi, I'm very proud that we put SAARC on the table, but perhaps we were a bit romantic about what SAARC could do. But in 1997, leaders of the SAARC community accepted the Bangladeshi proposal for adoption of sub-regional approach towards moving forward regional cooperation. In other words, you didn't have to agree as every one of the SAARC, but if there were sub-regions that could indeed deal with certain problems, then they could move ahead. That was a fundamental shift in terms of the tactic of how to create regional cooperation. And I think that has led to one of the most important shifts over the last several years in the eastern side of our region, in what we call the BBIN countries. BBIN area today, comprising Bangladesh, the Northeast states, West Bengal of India, Bhutan, and Nepal, which basically represents the old British Bengal presidency, has today 344 million people. And this area today is beginning to interact in a cooperative way that I think is fascinating. So to begin with, India-Bangladesh relations have forged forward steadily. The two countries have amicably and peacefully settled their disputes over land and maritime boundaries, which set the stage for their embarking on reviving road and rail connections that had been severed, and reoperationalizing coastal shipping and maritime shipping agreements. Interestingly, security concerns were all meaningfully and credibly addressed. All these directly translated into India agreeing to extend to Bangladesh practically one-way duty-free facilities in favor of Bangladesh without insisting on reciprocity. These are very phenomenal developments in the context of a region that decided to truncate its commons. But interestingly, waters still doggedly retain the status of toxicity, the forbidding touching, until very recently. What is happening today in the BBI sub-region is that river connectivity is opening up. And the dialogue on river connectivity is happening. And what we're beginning to see is both on Bangladesh side and on the India side, a declogging of the rivers, improving the management of navigation, and improving the management of waterways. And the two prime ministers have agreed to an approach of linking the waterways, to the point that today there has been a very important investment in ports, small ports along the rivers, all the way from the Kolkata port all the way to Nepal, that containers can move. And the company that has won the right to manage this whole process is a Bangladeshi company, right? These are very important shifts that are happening. And if we begin, and by the way, very important to see what kind of a shift. Inside Assam, today Assam is looking at river management by creating a corporate body that manages the jetties, a corporate body that manages the fleets, and a regulatory body that manages both those companies. Separation of policymaker, provider, and regulator, which is absolutely transformative in the way rivers are going to be managed. The same is happening in West Bengal, and the same already started happening in Bangladesh. Now, if the whole river system begins to be managed in such a corporate way, you have a completely different management of an internal riverway system. But I think what is extremely important is that reviving river connectivity opens another hugely exciting vista for everyone. Northeast India, Nepal, Bhutan, between them possesses well over 250,000 megawatt, and that's only estimate, of adequate power that has been a major hindrance to generating industrial revolution in the region. Bangladesh and India shattered the post-partition mindset by embarking on energy cooperation that has long-term ramifications for development and sub-regional economic integration. The grids on the eastern and western flanks of Bangladesh with India have been linked. The most exciting prospect lies ahead when two countries link up the respective northeastern grids that could transform into becoming a gateway for India to finally invest in harvesting hydropower of at least 60,000 megawatt and evacuating the same to India's mainframe national grid via Bangladesh. Right? This is happening quietly, and it's happening in a very important way. Talks are underway now for tri-nation joint ventures cooperation between Bhutan, India, and Bangladesh, and between Bangladesh, India, and Nepal for hydroelectricity generation and its shared distribution. One may well envision the ultimate linking of these presently separate bilateral power grids as harbinger of a sub-regional grid that by creating a web of interlinking grids of symbiotic independence in the energy sector will put in place the architecture of long-term energy security in the sub-region, which no further political dispensation would wish or dare to roll back or demolish. What's important is the whole issue of river connectivity moves water from the debate of water sharing, how much should I keep and how much should you get, to one of opening rivers so that the water can actually move goods, people, cargo, and release electricity. Right? This is perhaps one of the most important political opening in the coming years, and one that Bangladesh and India must find a way to take, bringing on board Nepal and Bhutan. But I have to argue that in order to see this done, there are very important state level, within the nation state, measures that need to be taken. The first, I think, in terms of India, is to recognize fully that the future of India lies in the states of India. And if the future of India lies in the states of India, developing state capability becomes extremely important. As state capability improves, the ability of sub-regional cooperation can indeed improve. Right? The ability of West Bengal and Assam to talk to Bangladesh lies in a connectivity between Guwahati, Kolkata, and Dhaka, and perhaps informing Delhi of all the wonderful things that are happening. Right? That, I think, is what sub-regional cooperation really means. But it needs an investment in federalism and needs an investment in state capability. The second area that I think for India is extremely important is its own BRI, its own Build Road initiative. We're all worried about China, but we forget that the GST is slowly allowing 29 nations of India to get integrated. And here, the amount of logistic investment, transport, infrastructure, logistic systems that can be invested will give Indian growth at least 2% more growth per year. That's the power of the integration internal to India. And if that happens, that ramification for the neighboring countries is huge, because India internally creating an infrastructure of logistics implies that its ports and its roads get linked to Nepal, to Bhutan, to Bangladesh in a very different way. So that's a second extremely important arena. The third, which is a continuation of federalism, I think the Westphalian state has to move from the notion of nationalism to the notion of citizenship. And citizenship means strong local governments. If local governments are strengthened, you'll find that the dialogue across Westphalian national boundaries improve. Because cities and towns and local governments talk to cities and towns and local governments across borders as equals, not as unequals. I'll give you a very interesting example. New Orleans often visits Dhaka. And New Orleans visits Dhaka with this very simple question. New Orleans says, we got flooded once and we couldn't survive almost. You, Dhaka, get flooded every year. How do you survive? So Dhaka and New Orleans are talking in ways that the government of the United States and government of Bangladesh do not talk about climate change in those similar terms. So subnational is a very powerful story in a Westphalian society of greater collaboration across states. I guess you would judge from my point that I see the importance of a European Union surviving and doing better as an extremely important model of the type of cooperation that can happen. The European Union and the way it manages its rivers and the way it manages the connection between ports, its rivers, and connectivity is a very powerful political economy example of what we can do in our part of the world. It's basically turning around and taking the British colonial power of extracting to completely turning it into economic empowerment for our region. The thing that I would end with, however, is in my opinion, one of the most challenging difficulties that we face as a region. Female labor force participation across South Asia is falling. Now, when an economic going on here that has to be changed, the urbanization of South Asia is not leading to women getting more jobs and women entering the labor market. There are issues of transport, there are issues of security, there are issues of how childcare is provided, which prevent women from entering the labor market. The reason I raise this is because I believe that one of the biggest dialogues that is happening quietly amongst our nations in South Asia is a dialogue amongst women. And that dialogue, I think, is one that can change the nature of our interface. But more important will be an understanding between countries of why labor force participation of women is falling. Because if we can change that, you change the entire economic backbone of nation. So, ladies and gentlemen, my perspective as a Bangladeshi who is here in India is the truncation of our commons was one of the deepest wounds of partition. And yet we have in our hands the ability to revive that commons and not fall in the tragedy of commons. But for that, we have to take a view of sub-regionalism as a way to regionalism rather than a whole regionalism. And from that perspective, the old Bengal presidency that led the way of this region has its roots today in what is happening between Nepal, Bhutan, Northeast, West Bengal, and Bangladesh. That the politics ought to continue supporting that arena because of river connectivity driving that story. So in my concluding, I do need to perhaps share a personal perspective on dialogue of nations. My wife, Samia, is a Hindustani classical musician. She's a vocalist. She's a disciple of Vidushi Padmasri Sumitra Guha, Kirana Gharana. And she was invited by Guruma to go and sing in the Kumbh Mela. Samia sat in the Kumbh Mela as a Bangladeshi Muslim and delivered in the power of Kirana Gharana a Shiv Bhajan. And as I watched her sing, I understood that the dialogue of civilizations could not be one left to economists or to politicians. It is one in which we must seek our roots of where we come from. And at that Kumbh Mela, I saw Vidushi Sumitra Guha and Samia take Kirana Gharana to another level in which there was connectivity, a connectivity amongst us as cultures and of belonging to a civilization whose strength is yet to be fully understood. And that, I believe, is where the true dialogue of nations begins. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Mr. Junaid Ahmed, for your words and wisdom. And now I request Mr. Shivraj Patil, former Lok Sabha Speaker and former Home Minister of India, that with such enriched experience for many decades as a seasoned politician and a policy maker, sir, what are your views on the subject of India and its neighbors, prospects for economic cooperation and development?
Well, first of all, I would like to welcome the guests who have come from abroad to participate in this discussion. I would also like to congratulate and thank the organizers of this event for saying that those people who have been thinking about international problems, national problems, state problems, regional problems, are given an opportunity to come together and discuss the issues. I would also like to congratulate all the previous speakers who have made, in a very short time, very relevant issues which are going to be very useful to us to understand many things. Dialogue is necessary in order not only to understand the problems which we are facing today, but dialogue is necessary to solve those problems also. Problems which are faced by us in the present time and the problems which may be required to be faced by us in the future. Dialogue is not something which is going to solve all the problems faced by human beings. It was very correctly pointed out by the previous speakers. Dialogue is necessary. It can take place at any time we like to have. But there are other things also which happen, and they have also to be dealt with. So the unilateral approach may not help us. We shall have to find out many other kinds of solutions to the problems which are faced by us today and in the days to come. We are talking about civilization. How the civilization came into existence. What do we mean by civilization? Is it the product of political activities only? Is it the product of economic activities only? Is it the product of social systems existing in different parts of the world? Is it the product of the religious philosophy which has come into existence and which has been influencing the human beings for thousands of years? I think the word concept has many aspects of human life which create it. And unless we understand that concept, it will not be possible for us to say in what fashion the civilization at a particular time to solve a particular kind of problem or to create a solution to solve that problem. That is very essential. In this dialogue, we have paid more attention to the problems which the world appears to be facing. And probably the strength that the civilization has also to be understood. And as to how that strength has to be used, has to be understood. We have discussed the relations with China, with Pakistan, European countries, the role of big developed countries of the world and all those things. I had an opportunity of visiting China 2-3 times. And one of the things which impressed me very much was this. The parliamentary delegation had gone there. And 2 future prime ministers of India were the members in that delegation. We were invited for a dinner. And one mischievous member of their legislature, their national body, which is like our parliament. Now he said, how many gods are there in India? And when this was said, all the Indian delegation, the members of the delegation, They were smiling and trying to understand what would be the reply given to that question. I said, there are 700 million gods in India. There's 700 gods in India? 700 million gods in India? Do they have enough temples for them? The gentleman was trying to understand. I said, look, in India, every human being's body, every citizen's body is a temple, and all that is good in human mind and in his heart is God. That gentleman got up from his table, from his chair, and came to me and took my hand and started shaking it. And he did not leave my hand. I said, what made you so happy? He said, what you said is very important. You also think like us. Now this answer really showed what kind of relationship India and China had in the past, and how they looked at the most important issues which were faced by the people in last thousands of years. Now he said, I said that you are thinking like us because our leader tells us that unless you treat a human being as a god, you are likely to think that he is not as good as you are. And for perfect equality, this concept is really useful and it should be used. Now, today, there was a book which had come some years back, Conflict of Civilizations, Huntington's book, and it was discussed a lot. Now, what he was trying to say that the civilization, there is a conflict in civilization, and out of that conflict, probably thousands of wars were fought in last so many years. Now there is something good in that also which has united the people also in the world. Wars are fought at certain times. 15,000 wars were fought in last so many years. Somebody was saying 15,000. I don't know whether that number is correct or not correct. We don't have to bother about the correctness of that number. But then, when the wars were not there, there were some problems which were faced by the countries which were solved through dialogue and discussions. And those dialogues and discussions could shed some light on the solutions which could be found and which could be used to solve those problems. That is exactly why dialogues can take place at any time, wars cannot take place at any time. We may not be able to stop the wars only through dialogue. Dialogue will definitely help. But at the same time, it has to be understood by everybody that everybody has a right to defend himself and he would like to do it and we should not take objection to it. That had also to be understood. while discussing China, objection to the road which is tried to be constructed is being taken. But we have just heard from our colleague that the road has to be constructed. Not only the road has to be constructed, but the water has to be allowed to flow into the river in order to have contacts and connections with each other. Why should we look to the road from that angle only? Why should you think that that is something which is being done in order to see that the European Union is not becoming very powerful? Why should you do that? Why should we do that? Now, this is a political angle. This is not an economic angle. Because every country in the world thinks that if you want to develop, you should have the connectivity. You should be able to travel fast without wasting the time. And that connectivity will help you to develop your economy, help you to understand each other better, help you to create art, music, and something which is not material but which is mental and which is also very important. Now, that kind of thing has also to be understood. European Union should not, European Union should become strong. Nobody should leave it. But if somebody is trying to see that the European Union does not work together, that is not good for the country. League of Nations was there, and it was created on the basis of the organization which was there in France, of the parliamentarians. And on that basis, the League of Nations had come into existence in order to see that the wars are not fought. But unfortunately, the League of Nations could not stop the war. And the Second World War took place. And when the Second World War took place, let us understand that because of United Nations, at least in 1948, in 1918, the First World War fought, and the Second World War started in 1935. In 18 years' time, 14 years' time, now 17 years' time or 18 years' time, whatever may be that figure. But today, United Nations has been able to see that there is no war, for a big war like that for all these years, from 1945 up to this time. So uniting is necessary. Dialogue is necessary for uniting also. When individuals were moving from place to place, then groups started moving from place to place. Then the villagers came into existence. Then the states came into existence. And then the nations came into existence. And when the nations started fighting, the United Nations came into existence. And the United Nations has come into existence. There are so many international organizations like WTO, like so many other international organizations, they are working.
Yes.
Today, we shall have to find a solution to the problem, and one of the solutions to the problem is that all the countries of the world unite. I was telling to the French friends who had come to India, look, you are trying to create European Union as we have created India. In Indian Federation. There were 600 monarchies in India. Chandragupta Maurya could not unite those numbers. They say that when Chandragupta Maurya there were 2,000 monarchies in India.
Yes.
They could not be united. Samudragupta could not be unite those nations. And Akbar also could not unite them. And British also could not unite them fully. 600 monarchies were there. In 1947, we became independent. In 1948, we united the entire country and abolished monarchy.
Yes.
Now, if we did it, it was really helpful. The problem, political problem of India is to remain united. Diversity is necessary. All human beings are there. They don't have the same kinds of features, but their birth, their deaths, their hunger, their anger is not different. And so the basic things are the same. If their dress is different, if they eat a different kind of food, if they talk a different kind of language, the principles which are necessarily followed by the human beings are not different. Now this has also to be understood. Today's problem of India is to remain united, allow diversity, but at the same time, the basic principles of keeping the country united have also to be understood and followed. For economic development of India, the most essential thing required is science and technology and the new knowledge which is there. Now the basic thing which is required by the world and India also is to see that the science and technology develops. The World Bank should not only help to develop economy, trade and industry. The World Bank, I think, should also, if possible, by making some changes if required, to provide funds for research and development to all those countries which require these kinds of funds, and these kinds of research and development can take place in different places in a different manner. That is also necessary. If that is done, it will be possible. I think that India, China, Japan, Pakistan, and many other countries in Asia, many other countries in Europe, and many other countries in America and in African continent, they would also have to come together
Yes.
to see that the problem, big problems like wars with atomic weapons do not take place. Atomic weapons cannot stop wars. But if they cannot stop wars, dialogues also by themselves cannot stop wars. Sometimes one gets a feeling that the big countries have not conflicted because of these deadly weapons with them also, because of United Nations also,
Yes.
and because of the basic good philosophy which is followed by the human beings. I don't think it is necessary for me to say anything more than this. In 9 minutes times or 10 minutes times, these things cannot be correctly discussed and correctly understood. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, sir. Thank you so much for your valuable input and insights. Certainly new equations are evolving and existing ones are changing, but balancing the equation is only possible through dialogue, and that's how and why time will remember organizations like Dialogue of Civilizations in bringing together the diverse perspectives in a non-confrontational and constructive spirit. And now, Mr. Bas for a word of thanks. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Rima. Thank you to the panelists, and sorry for pushing you a little bit, but we went a little bit beyond time. and also it's late, and we don't want also that the dialogue of civilization would be associated with starvation. So we are all a little bit hungry and certainly willing to have a drink and to continue the conversation all together. But I promise you that I will not take more than 1.5 minutes, as looking at the way ahead. And just to say that this evening was just a first, let's say, introduction about the dialogue of civilization, its work, and we wanted just to give you a glimpse of what we do, and I think those two panels tonight were giving a wonderful illustration of the capacity to promote dialogue in bringing multiple perspectives around the table, with a non-partisan perspective, bringing knowledge, innovation, thinking from very different sectors, bringing policymakers, experts, intergovernmental organization, and in the end, to become some sort of an incubator of new ideas and to promote innovative solution and innovative thinking. The dialogue of civilization will be also willing to promote this global conversation through a series of events, a series of projects. We are not bringing an agenda, we are bringing a methodology. And I think, what we are certainly willing here in developing activities here in India is really also to learn from the Indian experience, from the Indian history, and from the Indian culture. And in that respect, I think tonight was extremely interesting and brought lots of food for thought. What I would like really now to, on behalf of Dr. Yakunin, on behalf of the board, is really, first of all, of course, to thank everyone, but also to say how much we are expecting you to come to Rhodos. Please be in contact with Mr. Keswani, who can provide any information about the 17th edition of the forum in Rhodos. We are certainly welcoming you. I think it's very important to have a very strong participation from India. This will be also an opportunity to share information about activities, about programs, about initiative from the Institute. And we are really looking forward to the next step in the development of DOC here in India. I would like, before really to thank again all the speakers and the panelists. I think, you offered us a fascinating discussion, and I see now it's very late, but the room is still packed. So it shows that you had the capacity really to capture the attention, and I think this is a very positive signal. So a special thanks to all the speakers, to Vice President Ansari, to Chancellor Gusenbauer. Thanks to everyone, for making time to come tonight. Also, a special word of thanks on behalf, again, on Dr. Yakunin and the management of the DOC to Mr. Keswani, really for really putting together this very successful event. Special thanks also to Rima, who very effectively managed those two sessions, and also to my colleagues from the DOC team, who behind the scene really did a wonderful job. So thanks a lot to everyone. We are looking forward to seeing you very soon in Rhodos, and again, and have a cocktail now. Thank you.
Kभी